I just got to ask you, why are you still here? And I'm not being cruel. I'm just asking with love. Why are you still here? Why are you still here in this choice with this person, absorbing this? When some part of you knew, not suspected, you knew. You knew before you had enough invested in this to talk yourself out of it. Something in you registered exactly what it was that was going on. And then you picked up a napkin and just laid it over the top of it, and you just kept on moving, trying to act like you didn't see it. But you did know. But that's what we humans do sometimes. We see it and we glance over it. We try to talk ourselves out of what we saw, negotiate what we saw. I recognize that the world is already hard enough. It's already expensive enough just to exist out there, just being out there, because it costs us something every single day, with the demands and the noise and the performance of being okay when you're not entirely okay. The energy that it takes to navigate those spaces, especially when those spaces were there that were never really designed with you in mind. You absorb what's going on because you have to. Most of these costs, they aren't negotiable. You don't always get a say in what all it takes from you out there. But this relationship, this person, this was a choice. And it was your choice. And when you walked through that door, when you made space for them in your life, some part of you was expecting something different than what we get in the outside world. You're not expecting someone to complete you. You're not expecting perfection or a person who's never had any difficulties with their life, but you were indeed looking for a place to exhale, a place to be a soft landing for you, somewhere where the temperature was different from what it is out there. Some place, if you will, to refill you instead of another drain. And it seems like what you got was another slow leak. Not a blowout, not a rupture, and not something that you could just point to and say, yeah, right there. That's it. That's the moment. It's not that. It's a slow taking. It's never clean. It's never obvious. You know, it's almost imperceptible sometimes how you just do all that, and then there's less and less of you remaining in anything, less and less pressure, and you're tired, and you just one day you wake up and you're flat. You you wake up and pieces of you are gone, and you're standing there. You're trying to figure out when all of this happened, and you can't really tell. You can't really tell. You can't put your finger on one single moment because it was all of them. Every single small one of them. Not a particular betrayal, not something you can just put your finger on. and say, yeah, that's where it ended. It was because it was a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It was a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It was just this slow accumulation of little things that individually seemingly meant nothing, but they collectively meant everything. Where you've been boiling and you didn't even realize it. And the temperature kept rising, degree by degree, and your body just kind of adjusted after each little bump up, each little time, until it just became, and you didn't even realize that you were in danger. And that's the cruelty of it all. It just kind of sneaks in there. It just kind of sneaks in there and bops you upside the head, and it doesn't even give you a clean reason or a clear moment that you could point to. It's just a slow and steady becoming in the climate that you live in. And so you adapt. You adapted it within it. You start running these little bitty experiments on yourself. Even if you weren't necessarily aware, like, what if I ask less of this person? What if I stop bringing the heavy stuff in here? What if I, if I just go where they want to go? Or what if I keep things in the space in which they're comfortable, purposely trying to not make them uncomfortable? What if I just make myself easier? If I do that, will they finally see me then? And you weren't being weak, you were being hopeful. You know? And there is a difference between the two. There is a difference, but when you have hope that is misdirected for long enough, it starts to look a lot like self-abandonment. Yeah, and sometimes in all of that hoping, you stop being the person that you actually were, and you start being the person that created the least amount of friction. Then you call it compromise. Now I say that, and I want to say this, for those of us who have done the work, those of us, those who have sat with themselves in a really honest place. You know your patterns, you know your wounds, you know how you love, you know what you need. Sometimes what happens in people who have sat with themselves in that way, you see it, and you see it early, and something in you registers. It's like, hey, there's a gap here. This is going to be a problem. And we see that, and we know that, and then almost immediately we kind of flip it around and turn it on ourselves, and it's like, hmm, maybe my tolerance is too low. Maybe I'm being triggered. Maybe I'm being too rigid. Maybe it's just the stuff that I'm carrying. And because you take your own inventory seriously, because you have done the work of not projecting. You talked yourself out of what you saw, and then you did it again, and then you did it again. Your awareness overrode your discernment. You're in that space where you understand. You understand yourself so deeply and your trigger so deeply that you excuse them. You believed in the potential so sincerely and strongly that you waited and waited, and then you absorb that cost of that waiting. I want you to understand and remember that discernment is not judgment. Discernment is stewardship of your life, of your heart, of your spirit and your energy. You know, the one life that you are actually living inside of. Nobody else feels that slow leak. Nobody else wakes up flat and tries to trace it back to where that air went. Nobody does. So whose job is it to say this is not okay for me? It's yours. Only and always it's yours. But even with that, you're not obligated to therapize someone else's unwillingness into something that you can live with. You know, you are not required to be so evolved that you evolve yourself right out of your own needs. Giving someone grace does not mean giving yourself less. And what you saw early and clearly before you talked yourself out of it, that wasn't your wounds talking. That was the wisdom that you gained. That was the wisdom you gained, and you overrode that wisdom trying not to be unkind. You know, their why they couldn't show up, why they shut down when you ask a question, or why they could only receive and never really return what's given to them. That's not yours to carry. What is yours is the reckoning from that. It's not punishment. It's not that punishment, and it's not self blame. It's just honesty. Meanwhile, you're already tired from out there. The world already has asked everything of you today. Mhm. And here in this one place that was supposed to be different, you can't rest either. You know, and instead of that, instead of resting, you brace for things instead of exhaling. And that's not a partnership. That's two places to survive instead of one. And that grief that you feel in finally seeing that clearly, yeah, that there is loss in that recognition. Even when that recognition is the most necessary thing that could happen to you right now. But also underneath that grief, if you get still enough, there's something else. Something that's been watching you shrink and negotiate and extend grace past the point of being honored. You know, there's that something that's been trying to get your attention for a long time. And it's not anger. It's not devastation. It's just a clear knowing that you are more than you've been accepting of. You are more than what you've been accepting as your normal. I'm saying all of that to say you don't need to have an answer today. You don't have to have a certainty about what comes next. But don't talk yourself back out of what you saw. Don't do that. You saw what you saw, and you saw it for a reason. So sit with yourself there and continue to travel.